Well, hello ladies and gents, and welcome to this tutorial on using dynamic processing and namely compression in moving image productions. You can apply this technique to audio podcasts, to anything by using dialogue or vocals, or even working in music productions. So what I'm doing here will translate. Let me explain the context here. I'm currently in the middle of making a video to demonstrate the condition of a vintage synthesizer that I've just saved from going to the tip. I'm hoping to restore this and add it to my arsenal in the studio, but obviously currently more important thing is to spend money on the house, so we'll just have to see about that. But I need to be able to demonstrate to engineers what's wrong with it. So I'm currently making a video, and I'm going to use me making a video to show you how I would process my dialogue. Now you see the problem we've got is this. Let me play what we've got. This is completely untreated dialogue and audio from this video. Ladies and gentlemen, I have here a called Poly 61 vintage analog programmable polyphonic synthesizer that's been rescued from near certain doom. It's been stored in a cupboard for years. Right, so what we've got here, we've got a dialogue track, and this kind of just noise in the background is actually the noise that the synthesizer emits at the moment. Emits, puts out, you know what I mean? It's just, that's the only sound it makes. All right, I'm going to bring this in and out as I need it in the production. So I'm just going to mute that for now, but I'm leaving it in there because it's serving a very distinctive purpose. Did you notice, we're playing before, that my dialogue was kind of not that clear over the top? It was recorded using a cheap lav mic. It's all right for the money. I'm surprised it wasn't more noisy actually, because I had the window open and everything. So it's fairly clean, but it's not as stunning as a top-end studio mic or a condenser mic or something. It'll do for this purpose. But you will notice that my dialogue, some of the words are clear, some aren't. And that's because dialogue is notoriously spiky. You have to look at a waveform to know that. Let's have a zoom in. This is blue waveform here. You can see that dialogue spike. Oh, it's clipped. Wow, I don't know how I managed that. Okay, never mind. I have to just deal with that. That's not ideal, actually. You can see the flat edges there means that I've actually clipped, gone beyond the capabilities of my audio interface and added digital distortion. I can't hear anything on it, so I'm just going to leave it as is and not worry about it, but try and avoid that. So you can see it's up and down all the time. We've got really, really loud transients and we've got really, really quiet ones. And that's the nature of dialogue. So let's think about dialogue. The voice is made up of three elements. First element is your formant. It's the shape of what you're trying to say. In synthesis and music production, we call it the envelope. And it's all to do with how the sound starts, sustains, and finishes. And so there's sounds like, and there's and there's also different shapes and things we make as we speak. In fact, if I took my voice out of it, the form would be like this. It'll just be the shapes you make with your mouth and your tongue. That's what gives us language. That's what makes us understand what you're saying. Then you've got the tone. And the tone is what comes from your voice box. It's the sound that's unique to you. It's what makes you sound like you. And that's made up of a complex series of waveforms. And then you've got the pitch. So it's how high or how low you are talking as well. And those are three things that make up any sound. But we're going to apply this to dialogue. And what happens, because the formants are so up and down, you find that dialogue is very, very spiky. It needs to be controlled, particularly when it's mixed with other sounds. So I'm just going to say at this point, never, ever, ever undertake a media production or any kind of production that you want to be professional, which has dialogue or vocals in it, without applying compression. It just won't sound professional. And I'm going to show you exactly why in a second. So you've already experienced that at the moment, the dialogue sounds like it's just been plonked over the synth sound and it's not that clear. What I do, does I mix it higher? No. I'm going to use EQ and compression to sort it out. But the first thing to do, if you haven't done it already, is normalize your tracks. I think I've already done it in this project, and I've shown another tutorial how to do it, but it's very quickly. Click on G for audio gain, -6, enter. Right, it has already been done, but do that for all your audio, so at least it's peaking at the same level. Just to remind you that normalizing is a phenomena of digital recording. We couldn't do it back in the day of tape. And what it does, it reads the waveform, determines where the loudest bit is in your entire waveform, and then it will either increase or reduce the entire waveform in proportion, so it peaks at, in this case, 6 decibels below zero. And that means I can guarantee that all the tracks in my project will never go louder than 6 decibels below zero. -6 gives me 6 decibels of headroom to play with. In a simple project like this with just 2 parts, 6 decibels is plenty. If you're doing a big multi-track project with lots of music and stuff, take it down to -10, give yourself a bit more headroom. All right, so start off with that. So the thing about my dialogue is that, well, just have a little listen. A project. Now, considering I don't know one end of a soldering iron to the other, last time I tried to use a soldering iron, I actually burnt a hole in a circuit board. So I shouldn't be telling you that, but it's true. So it's a little bit dull. All right, it's a cheap mic. So I want to bring out a little bit more vibrance, particularly as that drone underneath is also quite dull. The two together. What I'm going to do is eventually going to take this apart. I'm just a bit grey and unprofessional sounding. So I'm going to first of all apply a little bit of EQ to the dialogue. Effects, audio effects, you find by going to effects at the top here, go over here and find audio effects, open up the box. You've got all these options here. We're going to go to filter and EQ. EQ stands for equalizer. It's where you deal with the bass, middle and treble, the tone controls of your audio. And I'm going to use a parametric equalizer, and I should explain why in a second. If you pop that in, if you go over to effect controls, below all the stuff for your aspect ratio and all that business, you'll find the audio stuff. There it is, parametric equalizer. It's got some things you can change just there, but if you click on edit, it will open up the actual equalizer itself, and there we are, all the things. Exactly the same as the setup in Audition and other bits of software within the Creative Cloud suite. So why am I using this one? It looks needlessly complicated, right? Well, it should actually be called a paragraphic equalizer. The para refers to the fact that you can actually select any frequency you like with any control. And you can move it up and down by any number of decibels, and you can change the type of application from shells to filters to bells or parametric equalization, and therefore shape a unique and bespoke pattern. And the reason why it's called paragraphic is because you can also see the shape up here, so it gives you a graphic representation. This is an excellent plugin because it also shows you a spectrum analyzer. It shows you what frequencies are in use. So if I play a bit of dialogue and just have a look inside, but the purpose of this video is just to show you, you get all this blue, and when you stop it, it shows you the peaks. That's a great place to stop as well. So what we can see here is this flat bit here is just kind of like rumble and noise. Nothing goes on dialogue wise at that level. I'm going to cut some of that out, but here we start getting some fundamental frequencies. Being a man, I have got fundamental frequencies down in the lower regions. But you can see the decided dip here in the high mids and the highs. And this is what's causing this to be a little bit and not very bright. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to do anything with the fundamental frequencies. They are peeking through nicely. I'm going to use the high pass filter, which is this number 1 here, just to cut some sub off. We don't need it. Got the option on Q or width to change the way that's approached. That's a little bit more controlled. That's fine, but I'm going to look at this region up here where I want things to spike through. So I'm going to use the number 4 node, which is kind of like high mids, low highs, whatever you want to call them. We don't really want to do much with the real top end because that's all sibilance and hiss and quite nasty frequencies. You don't need that, but I want my formants to bite through, and I want to sound a little bit more bright and sparkly. That's basically what I'm aiming for. I'm going to play it. What's happening with it at this moment in time. So right now, when you switch it on, you hear this kind of generic analog. Now, what I've done there is a very extreme EQ move. You'd never do that. But I'm going to use this to run up and down the frequency spectrum to listen and see where it best fits. Non-stop tone, which is not affected greatly by pressing any of the actual keyboard keys. It's almost like the hold is on, even though here, somewhere around there would really benefit my dialogue and make me sound a bit brighter, but not that much because it's too extreme. So I'm going to take it back down again. You've also got, incidentally, you'll see Q or width. Q stands for quality. If I find number 4, change the quality, you can either really focus in on that, or you can take a much broader aspect and pick up all the frequencies around it. So Q for quality, that's a better quality EQ maneuver. That's a lower quality and affects more frequencies. All right, so I actually want to affect the frequencies around it. It's not just one tiny frequency I want to adjust. It's kind of generally that area. So let's give that a blast. Hold isn't on. All right, so that's not making any difference. I've noticed that there are lights and things coming on this section here. It's very subtle, but I believe I've given it a bit of brightness. I've taken away any rumble that might be affecting, clashing with the rumble from that synth as well. So now I've dealt with the EQ, let's go for the compression. I'm going to go back to audio effects. We're going to go to amplitude and compression. Open that up. There is actually a dedicated, very good single band compressor. Multi-band gets more complicated. We'll deal with that in another tutorial. There's a tube model compressor, which is tailored and has got characteristics. It's very good for music. I wouldn't start applying that to dialogue unless you know exactly what you're doing. But what I'm going to use is this Dynamics plugin, which actually includes some other functions in it, but also has some very straightforward compression parameters. You can learn them. And again, just as I did with the EQ, I'm going to drag it on to the dialogue, and it appears here in the effects controls. Right, be useful at this stage just to point out that I don't really notice, but I've not cut anything up yet. I certainly didn't cut anything up before normalising, and I'm not cutting up anything till after I've compressed it either. When you're producing dialogue, try scene by scene to avoid cutting consistent dialogue up before processing, particularly normalising, because if you cut up first then normalising, you're going to end up with like each region normalising to a different peak level, and it's going to go up and down all the way through, and it'll be noticeable. Same with compression as well. You're going to have to keep repeating it and dragging that compressor onto each segment, and then remembering what settings are used, because I haven't found a way to save settings yet in Premiere. If you know how to do that, let me know, because it'll save me a lot of grief. Other programs like Logic and stuff you can actually save as a preset. There is a way of applying all these things globally, and I'll show you at the end of this video if I remember, but it's not very user friendly. I'll come to that in a bit. So yeah, always normalise and do your processing before any truncating, editing, cutting up if you can. The only slight deviation in that is if you've got a mistake in your audio, like the bang of a microphone stand or clatter, which is actually louder than the signal you're trying to keep, that would upset your normalising. That would obviously normalise to that peak level rather than peak level of dialogue. Cut those sort of things out first before processing. Right, back to where we are. We just applied a processor, and it's appearing here underneath the EQ, which is exactly where it should be. EQ first, then Dynamics. Click on Edit, and we open this piece of kit where we've got a gate, a compressor, and an expander. So somehow, don't ask me how, I've ended up not needing to use the gate. All right, I've had the window open, the mic isn't great. I thought there'd be some noise and need to gate out, but there isn't. If you've got a little bit of noise, like background hiss or things like that, or just ambient noise in the background, and you want to reduce the impact of that between signals, that's where you use a gate, and I'll do a separate tutorial on that at some point. It's the compressor we're going to be using at this stage, and the reason why I picked this compressor, because it has the 5 essential controls, which are going to help you learn how to manipulate a compressor. Do not use presets for a compressor, because every single situation is unique. So, how does this work? Well, a compressor works by, exactly as it says on the tin, it compresses the sound, it squashes the sound down. So what happens, it actually just nudges down the level of the loudest sounds within a waveform, leaving the rest of the waveform untouched. And the more extreme your compression, the more of the waveform is affected and pushed down, until you get to the point where everything's pretty much the same level and you've lost all your dynamics and all your shape and you've overdone it. So that's essentially what a compressor's doing. I quite often like to describe a car at the end of its useful life being rolled into a big metal squashing thing, a big metal compressor. Rolls in, the plate comes down, and it squashes the roof. The roof goes down, and the roof is now the same level as the rest of the car. The rest of the car is undamaged, well, in my world. All right, and then it goes down to the wheel arch and so on and so forth until the car's flat. All right, so that's what a compressor does. It literally pushes down the highest or the loudest transients and peaks within your waveform. So what you're achieving there is something called gain reduction, and it's perceived loudness. So by reducing the loudest bits, it's going to sound quieter to you, but actually a lot of the waveform hasn't got any quieter. And this is where this is really useful. So first of all, let's switch it on. So we need to learn first of all what threshold is. Threshold is the point in the signal path where the compressor is going to kick in. So at this point in time it says minus 20 decibels. It means the compressor won't even think about working until your audio reaches 20 decibels below 0. So my dialogue is peaking at minus 6. So minus 20 means that as soon as the dialogue gets up to minus 20, the compressor is going to work. Then you've got your ratio, which is how much compression you're going to apply. And all you need to know is that the higher we go, the greater the compression is. So it's going to be like this until it's almost the point where it's flat, and that's what we call a limiter. But we won't go into that today. You don't need limiters just yet. What does the ratio actually mean? What it means is that for every, say I'm on 3.1 now, it means that every 3.1 decibels that this audio goes over minus 20. So it goes to minus 20, it goes to minus, oh, now I've got some maths, minus 16.9, there we are. It means it will then push it back to minus 19, which is 1 decibel over. Wow, there's some quick maths. It'll be that same ratio throughout. All right, so it goes like 6 decibels over, 9 decibels over, it'll go to 2 or 3 decibels above. So it's not squashing it completely, it's not cutting it off, it's nudging it back. And of course, the higher you go, the greater the ratio. So 4 over 1 means for every 4 decibels it goes back to 1. That's a stronger compression. But all you need to know is threshold is where it starts, ratio, higher it gets, greater the compression. Use your ears. So let's have a listen now. So we've got the compressor on. I'm going to do something a bit more extreme so you can hear it. And do minus 30 and 4 over 1, which means for every 4 decibels this goes over minus 30, it's going to push it to 1 decibel over minus 30 instead. That's quite extreme.
Where the volume, joystick and tune are, so the volume works.
Okay, so
it's crusty, very crusty.
Without
joystick settings, the joystick's missing, by the way, but the actual functionality inside is still there. So if I move this around, you can start to hear. Okay,
you can hear quite a drastic difference. Have I done any good? No, I haven't at this point, but we don't worry about that just yet. But what we can see is here, this meter here shows you the gain reduction that I've achieved. So what's happened is I've reduced the loudest peaks to up to around about minus 12 decibels. But at the moment, it's all sounding a bit unnatural. The compression is too extreme. I'm going to leave it on this for now. I'm going to do a much more subtle compression in a moment and come down to these two controls here. Now, I've watched quite a few YouTube videos and I'm not, well, in my humble opinion, a lot of YouTube videos get this wrong. And they say, oh, just leave this on 1 millisecond. You don't need attack. Yes, you do need attack. You need to understand what it is because you need to make an intelligent choice on how to use it. The attack is how quickly the compressor switches on. If you leave it on 1 millisecond, it's pretty much instant. So as soon as we hit 30 decibels below zero, the compressor's going to on. It's going to be on full straight away. Whereas if you change your attack to, say, 6 milliseconds, it means that 6 milliseconds after threshold has been achieved, your compressor will switch on. So there's actually some stuff's going to come through before it's compressed. Why have we got this? Well, let's go back to our formants and our tone. If you want to capture the shape of the formants more prominently, then you need to slow the attack down. Otherwise, they're going to get squashed flat. And you're going to end up with you can't really hear the definition. Instead of they're going to get squashed. So if you want to hear those cut through, you need more attack. The trouble is that makes your dialogue more spiky again. So you might want to compromise and do somewhere in between. Types of dialogue where it is completely squashed flat, typically things like radio jingles, you tend to, where they're very nasally sounding, but the boost is so loud they cut across anyway. But dialogue in a film, you need to hear the shape of the words for the audience to understand what you're saying. So I'd give it I'd slow that attack down and allow the formants to peek through before the tone of your voice gets compressed. So let's try this now.
Little bits of change, so something's happening there. Arpeggiator, the light comes on and off. And
so a slow attack.
It doesn't really make any
and then with fast attack.
What's not working here is any of the programs.
Hopefully you can hear the difference.
Keys are dead. There's no lights on. You can't select new programs.
So I think I've got just about the right setting. I'm going to actually reduce the level of compression in a moment. Release is how quickly the compressor switches off after it's fallen below threshold. You want that fairly quick so they can recover and compress again effectively. If it's too slow, then the compression will never switch off and you start compressing those transients and those formants again. But if it's too fast, you'll end up with little clicks and bounces in the audio, so it'll be snapping on and off really quickly. So 50 milliseconds is actually pretty good. But if you want a much smoother sound, like a radio jingle, then crank it up. So you've got very, very consistent compression across the board. I'm going to lighten this up slightly. I might leave it at minus 30, but bring the compression ratio down.
And nothing coming up on these LEDs here for parameter, program number and value.
Okay, so I don't know if you can see up here in the gain reduction meter, I've kind of lost around about 11 decibels from my loudest sounds only. Remember, the quieter sounds haven't been affected. what I'm going to do is I'm going to just increase this makeup gain at the bottom here by 11 decibels. All right, which means that my dialogue is going to be the same level it was to start with, but the quieter bits are going to be a lot louder. All right, let's see what happens.
That's all dead as a dodo. So this is the sound it makes.
With compression?
I need to work out what it's worth fixing. So I'm going to look inside it myself, and I shall show you some more when I've done that. I suspect it's probably going to be beyond me, and it's going to end up going to a proper...
Much stronger now, much stronger. I've used the tack to make sure I maintain the shape of my words. Let's see how this now fits with that kind of drone from the synth. All right, and you should find that you now hear everything I'm saying over the top of the synthesizer.
Service company to get it fixed up, and I need to then weigh up whether this is worth fixing, because in good condition, working the synthesizer.
And it's worked. Okay, so I've brightened up my vocal with a bit of EQ, I've compressed it, it does sound a little more nasally, it sounds less natural, but it's much stronger and it cuts across in production. You're going to help your viewers understand what you're saying. Now, I did say I was going to talk about applying global compression. If you look in your mix, you've got this tiny little arrow at the top here, it actually opens up these inserts. You wouldn't know they existed unless you clicked on the little arrow. And if you click in any of these slots, or the little arrow, little drop down, you can add amplitude and compression, dynamics, and there it is added in. The trouble is you can't actually open the graphic user interface. That's a right royal pain. You don't get to see the meter, so using your ears only, which for me is not good because I'm half deaf. I kind of need the visuals as well, and you've got to choose all the right things just from a list. So first of all, compressor enabled, yes, we need that on. Then I've got a mouse pad here, so it's really, really fiddly. Go on, there we go, it's on. Next one is threshold. I wanted that on -30, didn't I? It's going the wrong way. There we go, roughly -30. And then I want the ratio, what was it, about 3/1. At least it gives the ratio in a bit more correct, yeah, form. There you go, 3.3/1. And then my makeup gain was about +11. All right, and that will now apply to the entire track regardless of edits. All right, so
I've got to watch out. My missus probably got better use for that money than yet another synthesizer.
Oh yeah, good point. Don't tell my missus I've got this. So there we are. That's how to add compression, use dynamics in Premiere. I'll do some more videos on how to use the gate and all that jazz. Thanks for watching. Speak to you soon.